Yes, folks, New Zealand is in for a rough ride ahead. Now, I could be wrong, but I would say our dear leader, Comrade Ardern, will form a coalition with the two most radical parties in New Zealand, the Communist Greens and the Separatist Maori Party. And of course, as Jacinda can govern alone, those two radical parties won't get exactly what they want, but you can be assured a lot of nudge, nudge, wink, wink will be going on during the negotiations. And I would say the rough ride will include the following. A tax will be placed on petrol and diesel vehicles to subsidise electric vehicles. Billions of dollars will be wasted on failed wind and solar energy projects. Jacinda will legalise dope regardless of the referendum result, as she'll want the tax. Farmers will be decimated, especially if the Greens get their way. Thousands of households could run out of gas to fuel their heating, cooking and hot water, etc., thanks to Ardern's ban on offshore oil and gas exploration. Communist China will move in as our debt balloons. Ardern will introduce the Greens' wealth tax under a different name, of course, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And I'll cover that a bit later, but first let's have a look at what the Māori Party wants. Māori Party promises to establish Māori Parliament if elected. The Māori Party would set up a separate Māori Parliament, among other constitutional changes as outlined in its Mana Motu Haki policy. So this is what they want. The Māori Party would establish a Māori Parliament, register all Māori to Māori electoral roll and ensure Māori can switch between the Māori and general roll at any time. Cake and eat it. Implement constitutional change in line with the 2016 Mātiki Mai report, encouraging discussion between Māori leadership groups. Return conservation land to iwi, including camping grounds. Establish a Waitangi Parliamentary Commission to be jointly appointed by Tangata Whenua and the Crown. Entrench the Māori electoral seats. Reduce party vote threshold to 2.5%. They don't ask for much. End full and final settlements and large natural groupings, ensuring smaller hapu and iwi can have rights recognised. Waitangi Tribunal recommendations to be binding on the Crown. Insert relativity clauses into all settlements to ensure all iwi have parity with Ngātahu and Tainui. Remove racist provision that allows for local council decisions to establish Māori wards. And if you scroll down here, we'll see there's no mention of money whatsoever. So let's find out about the money side of this. The Māori Party's vision of self-determination is not to be ignored. Yes, that's for sure. We simply cannot ignore this. Now, the Māori Party are back in Parliament again, and Jacinda Ardern will take them under her wing, and she will seriously give this separatist stuff a look. This is absolutely dangerous, folks. This will split New Zealand right down the middle. This is apartheid stuff. This is not good for New Zealand. Not at all. Anyway, I'll just scroll down to the money bit. While launching the idea of a separate Maori Parliament with 15 to 17 seats and control over $20 billion of annual self-managed spending, Māori Party co-leader John Tamihere said mainstream control of things Māori had been an abject failure after the country was settled by consent, not by conquest via the Treaty of Waitangi. So we have 20 billion of annual so-called self-managed spending. So what could go wrong here? For a start, how much of this money would actually go down and help average Maori people? And how much of it would be siphoned off at the top by the likes of John Tamahiri and other troffers? This is a separatist rort. We simply cannot have this kind of stuff going on in New Zealand. So, guys, we cannot even let this get started. It just can't start. This kind of stuff cannot happen in New Zealand. But it could under Jacinda Ardern. Now this clip highlights the farmers' concerns about the Greens.
Farmers say their anxiety following the election is like a powder keg. Some voted for Labor strategically in the hope they would govern alone, closing out the Greens. But they're still nervous about the direction Labor will now take. Keisha Brownlee reports.
The last of 600 lambs getting their tails docked. It's not something they like, but could see it coming, much like the rural community on election night.
I'm not necessarily surprised by the outcome.
Without surprise, but with concern.
There's so much anxiety out in our rural communities, I'd almost describe it as a powder keg.
Labor is yet to confirm whether they'll govern alone or bring in the Green Party, something several farmers voted strategically to prevent happening.
Yeah, farmers voting Labor. It's truly amazing, isn't it? But I understand it. National has deserted them. They voted for the zero carbon bill and have turned into a Green Party themselves.
The Greens have got unworkable policy intentions that would cripple agriculture across New Zealand.
Including fixed dates for winter resowing.
Putting in arbitrary dates just doesn't work when you're relying on the weather to play the game.
Farmers hoping they'll be included in discussions about the freshwater policy and wealth tax.
Yes, nearly every farmer in New Zealand would have assets over $1 million and would be subject to the wealth tax.
We need to remember at the moment that by and large it's the food production sector and the primary production sector in New Zealand that are keeping the lights on in this country, and the Greens have got a set of policies that would turn those lights out.
Yeah, exactly. So let's have a closer look at that tax.
While you were in lockdown, doing your bit to keep us all safe, here at Green Party headquarters, we've been working on an action plan, a really good one, to fix a bunch of things that the COVID-19 pandemic crisis has exposed. Now, it's fair to say that 2020 has been quite the year. What we know is people on low incomes and those who are out of work simply don't have enough to get by. This has become very clear, very fast for many New Zealanders who unfortunately are now out of work for the first time. So we've got a plan to change that, a transformational overhaul of our social safety net that gives us the help that we need when we need it. It's called a guaranteed minimum income, and here's how it works. The guaranteed minimum income will replace all current working age benefits with a base rate of $325 a week. Now, why $325? Well, it's half what couples get on superannuation. It's about the equivalent of working 20 hours a week on the minimum wage. And it's in line with the increase suggested after a major review of our welfare system in 2019. That $325 will apply to all working age adults, including students. That's the lowest amount anyone will get. The guaranteed minimum income also has top-ups depending on your situation. For example, people with children. Families will get $190 a week for the eldest child and $120 a week for each younger sibling. Sole parents will get an extra $110 a week to reflect the incredibly difficult task of raising a child on a single income. And we'll extend the Best Start package to $100 a week for all children under 3 years old. If you find part-time work, which we know many are in the wake of COVID-19, you'll still get a portion of the guaranteed minimum income. We'll also reform ACC so that you're supported if you're unable to work because of sickness or disability, regardless of how it came about. It's enough to live with dignity, because when people ask for help, we should help them. It's that simple. Now, I know what you're thinking, and you're right. This all sounds great and fair, but how are we going to pay for it? Well, under our current system, a few of us have been able to do really well, while the rest of us haven't been quite so lucky. That's because in New Zealand, we tax work and income, but we don't tax assets and wealth. In other words, we tax people who earn, but not people who own. To fund our guaranteed minimum income, we're proposing a contribution from the wealthiest 6% of New Zealanders. Wealth, by which I mean accumulated assets over $1 million, will be taxed at 1%.
Now that 1%, that 6% is absolute BS. Every farmer, every big business, every successful small business, every landlord with 2 or more houses, and everyone who bought a house about 20 odd years ago would be subject to this tax.
Wealth over $2 million will be taxed at 2%. It's similar to schemes in Switzerland, Norway and others. And Switzerland and Norway are both wealthier, more productive countries than New Zealand and have stronger social safety nets and public services. The wealth that they generate goes back into supporting everyone to contribute and to strong, well-run economies. Now, this new wealth tax applies only to net wealth after mortgages and debts are taken into account. What that means is that only the amount that you actually own counts towards this. Having a mortgage doesn't. Everything up to $1 million attracts no tax. So, if your house is worth, say, $1.2 million, but you've got a $700,000 mortgage, your net wealth is $500,000 and you won't pay any tax. But if your house is worth, say, $1.2 million and you own it outright, you'll be taxed 1% of the $200,000 above $1 million, and your contribution will be $2,000 a year. The tax is levied on individuals, so if you jointly own that $1.2 million mortgage-free house with a partner, then your net wealth will be $600,000 each and below the threshold. If you're asset rich but income poor, there will be an option to defer payments until such time as an asset is sold. And we'll close up tax loopholes to ensure everyone pays their fair share. Because if the country is doing well, we should all benefit, not just 6% of us. Now make no mistake, this is a transformational change. But if we truly want to end poverty in Aotearoa, we need to be bold.
Yes, folks, that guy sure is disgusting. He spews out all these communist ideals with a smile. His entire green agenda is UN-driven communism. Yes, folks, New Zealand is most certainly in for a rough ride ahead.